Hello, welcome to Rockanory. I'm Zoe Howe, and today I'm going to be reading from this beautiful book here, Touching from a Distance by Deborah Curtis. And it's all about, as I'm sure many of you know, Deborah Curtis's life with her late husband, Ian Curtis from Joy Division, who tragically took his own life 31 years and 1 day ago. So this reading is kind of dedicated to him, and I hope you enjoy it. As I say, it's a book you probably, some of you may know, I'm sure. So yeah, this is from the end of the book, where Deborah is describing her final weekend with Ian. I recall the events of that final weekend, and it's as if I'm watching a video that someone else has produced in my absence. I've run it through so many times, looking for a point to break and insert some other sequence of events. I do know I'm not the only person to feel like this, to spend time thinking if only, making the mistake of believing there was one single action which could have saved Ian's life. Now I'm grateful he died at home, and not while he was on tour in America. Tony Wilson was quoted in Select magazine as saying Ian Curtis's death was the worst thing that ever happened to us, if only he'd survived for another 36 hours and got to America. In reality, Ian looked towards that particular trip with some trepidation. He feared the American reaction to his epilepsy in certain states, and he was terrified of flying. He longed to travel by ship, but mentioned it to no one but me, as he knew this was an illogical and impossible idea. I don't believe he had any intention of going to America. If he had, I doubt if being there would have prevented his suicide. That weekend was particularly busy for me. There was the usual disco on Friday night, a wedding reception on Saturday afternoon, and a further disco for the wedding in the evening. I was pleased to have the opportunity to earn more money. Then Ian rang unexpectedly and announced he'd be coming home on Saturday before flying on Monday. Sunday was to be the only day I had free that weekend, and although I was apprehensive about seeing him again, I thought perhaps his visit indicated a desire to talk. I'm not sure Ian understood why I was working as a barmaid and waitress. Rock stars jetting to the States to make a living was far removed from the existence I'd led for the previous year. I was behind the bar until after midnight on Friday the 16th of May, and also worked the lunchtime bar on Saturday. I slept at my mother's house because Natalie was staying there. During my afternoon break, I rested and then went down to see Ian before starting work again the evening. I explained to him what my work situation was and that Natalie would be sleeping at my parents' house that night. "Why don't you bring her here?" he said. "She'll be okay with me." I tried to reason with him. It seemed such a simple request, but I didn't trust him. Eventually, my mother helped me by making the decision for me, and we kept Natalie away. Ian said he wanted to talk to me, and I promised to go back after work. A friend's sister was married that day, so there were people I knew at the wedding reception who asked me how Ian and I were. I nodded and smiled. Everything was fine. Yes, everything was just wonderful. I was eager to keep up the charade, not wanting to tell a wedding party that my own marriage had failed. I collected glasses, stepped over extended legs, and dodged waving arms, with my own limbs aching and my head pounding. In the early hours of the morning, in Barton Street, Ian had been watching the Werner Herzog film. When I arrived, he'd almost finished a large jar of coffee and was helping himself to another mug of the thick black mixture. He asked me to drop the divorce, and I argued that he would have changed his mind by morning. There was no talk of love that night. The last time it had been mentioned was when he told me that he didn't think he loved me. He told me he'd spoken to Anik earlier that evening. Their relationship was still very much alive, and I began to feel extremely wary. Our conversation was going around in circles. Ian was afraid I'd meet another man while he was away. As he became more unreasonable, I was convinced he was going to work himself up into a fit, so I offered to spend the night with him. I drove to my parents to tell him what I was doing, but when I returned to Ian, he changed his mind again. This time he wanted me to stay away altogether. I could tell by his face that the fit wasn't going to surface. He made me promise not to return to the house before 10 a.m, as he was catching the train to Manchester then. Any other night, and I might have stayed to argue with him, but I was exhausted and relieved that I was allowed to leave. I drove the Morris Traveller along Bond Street. Ian would be okay, he always was. I'd spent too many nights sitting up with him. It was time to look after number one. After I'd gone, Ian made himself still more coffee. In the pantry was the all but empty whiskey bottle from which he squeezed every last drop. He listened to Iggy Pop's The Idiot. He took Natalie's photograph down from the wall, retrieved our wedding picture from the drawer, and sat down to write me a letter. It was a long, very intimate letter, in the same sprawling capitals he used to write his songs. He did say he wished he was dead, but didn't actually say that it was his intention to kill himself. He talked of our life together, romance and passion, his love for me, his love for Natalie, and his hate for Annick. He couldn't have hated Annick. I never heard him say he hated anyone. I think he wrote that to try to please me. He told me he couldn't bring himself to be so cruel as to tell her he didn't want to see her again, even to save his marriage. The pages were full of contradictions. He asked me not to get in touch for a while, as it was hard for him to talk to me. By the time he'd finished writing, he told me, it was dawn, and he could hear the birds singing. I crept into my parents' house without waking anyone. I was asleep within seconds of my head touching the pillow. The next sound I heard was this. This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend. The end. I'll never look into your eyes again. Surprised at hearing the door was the end, I struggled to rouse myself. Even as I slept, I knew that that was an unlikely song for Radio 1 on a Sunday morning. But there was no radio. It was all a dream. I'm going to leave it there for now, but as I say, that was from Touching from a Distance by Deborah Curtis. It's a really moving book and very insightful, of course. And as I say, I'm sure that many of you know it, but if you haven't got it in your personal library already, then there is a link underneath this video, as always, where you can find out where to get the book. And hope all of you enjoyed that, and that you will be back to view more Rockanory videos. I will be a little bit more faithful to you now. I will be posting up more regularly. I know I've been very remiss with my video posting, but that's going to change. So stay tuned and keep in touch, and thanks for watching.